Live from Long Island, New York, ladies and gentlemen, and also New Jersey. We have a wonderful guest today, Mr. Richard Squires from LifeStory Memoirs. Hi, Agnes. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I'm so excited about this episode.
Yes.
A
Yeah,
lot of
this
good
is,
things.
this is one of those things that just fits right into our wheelhouse. We've been talking about what is love, what is death, what are taxes, what is your life coming into, and this sort of distills directly into it. Richard, welcome to the show. Give us 1 second and let me do a full-on introduction of exactly who he is. Ladies and gents, this is Love, Death, and Taxes. So,
There we
Agnes, why
are.
are you so excited about our particular guest today?
Well, I kept talking and talking and talking for years about my upcoming book, but actually, thanks to Richard, we actually will finish that. He is the one right now doing all the writing, doing the interviews, because I found this process being very emotional for me, and it stopped me in tracks in a lot of moments. So Richard is fantastic. He's helping me with putting everything together and interviewing me and finishing what I started, and then we will see where we're gonna go with that. But yes, by the end of the year, my book will be done, and I can tell my story thanks to Richard. Yes, so there will be wonderful, wonderful when I'm actually very happy that I found you, Richard. Thanks to our mutual friend, I found you, and it's very exciting that you were able to, you know, do this project with me. And you have, and we can see on the background, a lot of books that you already wrote. So please tell us exactly what are you doing for other people.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Agnes and Ryan, for having me on the show. It's very exciting. It's been some time since I've been on a podcast, but it's been, first of all, my pleasure and a blessing to meet you through our mutual colleague, and to learn about your story and tell it. And it, you are an impressive person. You are a winner. To learn about your story, and we all have challenges in our lives. Story is at its essence, worthwhile stories are sort of based around conflict, and that's what makes an exciting story and a good story. And so when I'm helping someone tell their story, very often that's kind of what we're trying to tease out. What is the challenge that we overcame? What is the problem we faced, and how were we successful? How did we show heart? Because those are the people, that's what leads to love, being a person with integrity who shows heart in the face of challenge. And your story is awesome, and it's been a pleasure working on yours. I've done, by this time, with LifeStory Memoir, I've written about 55 memoirs for people, so
Impressive.
a few dozen. Since I started, I absolutely love doing it because I get to know people really well. I interview them about their lives. I get to know people in a way that most professional people don't. It's very often, it's like being a therapist, being a psychologist.
Yes.
People open up those parts of their lives to me, because that's where the good material is, and that's what makes a good story, and that's what people want to pass on. And it's very difficult for someone to do that for themselves if they're maybe not a writer. They're not really someone who is concentrating and focusing on storytelling all the time. And even for myself, I am a writer and storyteller. Writing my own material is much harder than writing someone else's material, because I'm further removed from it.
Oh, absolutely. I found it myself in a situation where I started a couple years ago to write, and then it stopped me. A lot of moments stopped me in my tracks just because I started realizing certain situations, and then it hurt. And then my feelings got involved. So I was, oh no, I cannot do that. So I stepped back, and then, oh no, I have to do this, get back, because um, even during our conversation yesterday, like Richard and I were speaking yesterday, for me, I want to inspire other people with my story, because literally with me applies, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So, especially for women, I wanted them to learn that they can persevere. But I was talking about you to a couple of my friends, and even to my sister today, praising you for the work that you're doing, because even in my family, we wish we could get back in time and talk to our grandparents, to our parents, to find out the stories, the myths. Like, I was lucky enough to find a cousin, um, second cousin once removed, exactly, that's the relation, who confirmed some stories that they were true, because you don't know. Sometimes you hear things, you don't know what's true, you don't know what's myth. And you your job, it's like just fantastic, because you can talk to people and leave for other generations the stories and the family history that otherwise the grandchildren, great grandchildren will never find out about.
Yeah,
You know what else I think is amazing about that? He can ask some things that you're probably not allowed to ask your mom or your dad or whoever else in your family. You might receive some information that you would never have heard otherwise, because they would just be I don't even know if it's embarrassed is the word, or they just feel like protocol. You know how family protocol is? Oh, no, no, no. We don't talk about that, or we're not going to tell you about that. But talk to a biographer, it might be a whole thing. Have you got a lot of people spill their entire guts to you, Richard? How does that work out?
people almost always tell me things. Well, first of all, yeah, they tell me things that they wouldn't tell their family. Not because they don't want their family to know it, because it's going to be in the book, but for some reason that's a conversation that doesn't come up because their family doesn't want to ask them, or they're not comfortable doing it. But and when we follow breadcrumbs down the trail, and I want to try to dig down to the essence, because people do things and things happen, and there's always a why behind it. And I ask questions and I try to get to the bottom of it. And people don't typically have conversations just like that. But, even if it's stuff that, isn't, say, sensitive or controversial, there's people have a few stories that they like to tell over and over again, that they tell all the time, maybe 10 stories. And those are the stories that the family, knows that they're going to be in the book. Those are the first stories that my clients tell me. But then there's all this new material that stories that, people don't ask them, and they're not talking about it all the time. And so even someone who knows their parents or their grandparents really, really well, they're really close. There's all this new material that comes out every time that they didn't know, and that they're really happy to learn. And just talking about, these are like legacies. And my clients have this opportunity to tell their story their way, the way they want it to be, the way that they want their legacy to be, that this is the way they're going to be remembered. And the story is put in print, and it's online, and there it is forever, and my mission, one of my missions, is that your family stories aren't lost, because most of our family stories are lost. And it's a shame. There's only so much I know about my story. I know some things that my grandfather told me. I know that my family came over out of Port Hamburg, Germany in 1888, when my grandfather's father was 2 years old. And actually, we did some ancestry research. I have the manifests. But there's a lot that I don't know about my grandmother's family or my mom's side. There's so much.
Yes, it's so much fun discovering all that history, family history. And I remember some stories that my sisters don't remember, and now I keep just, to whomever I talk to, I keep telling them those stories, but I'm thinking like, no, I really do have to write this down, so people will remember the same way they've been told to me those stories. And my next project will be actually putting up album with all the old pictures. I have some family pictures with from 1933, my great grandparents. It's fantastic. I stole them, I admit, from my mom. So before I left the country, so I now I feel like I need to share them with others. But pictures will tell you just some stories, at that present moment, but you don't have the background which you are providing, right?
It's interesting how pictures, they fade over time, right? And even physical pictures, they're going to degrade. So you really should digitize them. But
Yes.
stories fade over time too if they're not written down, because they get passed on from generation to generation orally, but then they get changed, like you said, and also they kind of just lose their edges and they get dulled down. And eventually, a couple generations later, the stories are forgotten.
So real, so true. There are stories that have been told about me as a child that I have heard multiple times, and I've heard them change, which like disturbs me at this point, because say I'm going to pass those on to your kids. There's a whole thing about me and soda and a tricycle. We're not even going to go there. But I do want to say, Richard, and Agnes, it's a great point you brought up about photography, because sometimes there's a lot of words in photography, and I think you have a project that you're working on currently with a coffee table book or something like that, Richard.
Yes, very exciting. So first, I'll just kind of show you, like, this is an example of one of the memoirs that I did a while ago. This is my client Victor. Fantastic guy. What a life. Grew up in Brooklyn, during the Great Depression, grew up poor. I have a lot of clients who grew up in Brooklyn, and they all say it was the best place to grow up. And in those days, they didn't know they were poor because they were all the same. Everyone was equal, but they played in the streets. They played stickball, all of that. And just to kind of show you how I filter the pictures throughout, because pictures are important. And I'm a big believer in, what you were just saying about how, they say a picture tells 1,000 words, speaks 1,000 words, but if you can actually tell the story and provide the context behind the picture, that's like 1,000,000 words. But now I'm working with my client Larry on this coffee table book of his photography. He's a professional photographer. He's been doing it for 50 years, and he has fantastic photos. And I've always had the dream of working with someone who wanted to do a coffee table book. And we finished it, and I don't have it here to show you because he's reviewing it now. We ordered one copy, but it is a hefty thing. His photos are fantastic. He did a lot of red carpet stuff, a lot of celebrities, but he also did nature photography and a lot of politicians. And I loved interviewing him. I got his artist statement, so that's a big introduction. It's a robust 10-page artist statement about how he got into photography and his philosophy on it and what it means to him and all of that. And then for each of the pictures, there's like a robust caption, and it's awesome. It's 250 pages and it's heavy.
That has to be.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it.
That's amazing. And so how is that different, putting that together? Because I would think a guy putting together pictures is more outward looking rather than inward looking. How different is that from your biographies that you normally do?
Well, I enjoyed interviewing him, and every picture that he chose of thousands and thousands of pictures that he has, we had to whittle it down. But he feels a personal connection to them, and he had a personal experience. He took a picture of Henry Fonda that he thought was a fantastic picture, and Henry Fonda didn't like it, and he told him so. And then he took a picture of Chita Rivera, who is supposedly a very difficult lady, and she loved the picture, and she was so kind to Larry. And there's even more profound stories with his other pictures, but I loved. There's a personal experience that he had with all of the pictures, and how his love of photography and his philosophy on as what makes a good picture, and also how to treat his subjects, because he would talk about how the paparazzi on the red carpet, they were just brutal, and he wouldn't do that. Oh, I'll tell you a pretty good story. Is he was somewhere, I can't remember, it was in a war zone. It might have been in Israel, and they were on some border, And he was there taking photos. These were like, political journalistic photos. And there was another photojournalist there with his wife. And a stone was thrown. And it hit this photojournalist's wife in the head. And she fell over and she was bleeding. And the photojournalist did not attend to her. He kept snapping his pictures because that's what was most important to him. And Larry saw that and he said, I would never be like that guy. Larry realized that he wouldn't go that far, that his humanity was maybe took precedence over his art.
That guy felt like the story was even more important than the fact that someone was actually possibly dying.
His wife. Yeah.
And it was his. Wow.
And I understand that, but I don't know. I don't think I'd be that way. Most of us wouldn't be that way, and Larry wasn't.
I completely understand, but you're right. That's divorce territory. That's another show. There's no way. Speaking of divorce and love, how about you mentioned to us that you worked on a love story, because some of them are biographies, but it sounds like you also have the melding of two separate stories in this particular thing. James and Ellie's love story. What was that?
So this is their book here. They are from Croatia, and they live the American dream together forever. Our Adventures from Communist Croatia to the American Dream by James and Ellie. And so, it's their life stories that I do, but I've done a number of what I call love stories because they're not the stories of just one person, but they're the stories of a couple. And I love doing it. And I love, finding out how the two people became the people that the other person fell in love with. It's not just about their life together. It's about their childhoods growing up and what they went through that shaped them, so that one person became the person the other one fell in love with, and vice versa. And then their lives together. So it's always broken up. The early section is the one person. Then the next section is the next person. And then the third section is their lives together. And the story there. Yeah.
That's great. It's like watching a television show and they're showing you both what's happening over here and what's happening over there, but then the parallels between the two things and how it actually works out. I'm fascinated. Now I feel like I want to see a bunch of your books. How did you get into this, Richard? I see you've got it says here, you've got a lot of education behind this, a couple of master's degrees. You've been doing this for a while. It seems like you're talented at it as well. But why did you decide to become a life story memoir writer?
So I was always all about story. When I was growing up, I was very much into the movies and into reading and into writing. And throughout high school, I was writing a lot of poetry and fiction. And I just knew that when I went to college, I would study writing and literature. After that, I did I was in a number of creative industries. I worked in film. I worked for a museum. And then I got into corporate writing at some pharmaceutical companies. And I was really itching to get back into the creative mode. So I went for one master's degree back in the early 2000s, and that was a Master of Arts, and then I got a Master of Fine Arts. I've also taught writing at the college level and the high school level. And when I was getting my second master's degree is when my grandfather, Ben, asked me if I would write his life story. So Grandpa was very influential in my life because I grew up listening to him tell stories. He loved telling stories, and my family, we're full of storytellers. But my grandfather's stories really stood out because he fought in World War II. He flew fighter planes. And of all the stories that he used to tell, there was one story that really stood out. So when he asked me if I would write his memoir, I thought of that. And I was like, yes, that's the first story we're going to talk about. And the story is that, he flew fighter planes in the Pacific. And they used to go out on missions, and the enemy would shoot these projectiles from the ground up that when they hit a certain altitude, they would explode and they would send out flak, which are little metal shards that are as sharp as razors. And whatever they hit, they would destroy. So on one occasion, they hit my grandfather's airplane and they kind of ripped the whole side of the plane off, and they hit my grandfather in the leg. and gave him scars that I used to just marvel at. I can remember being a little boy and running my finger over the scars on his legs. They look like slugs, little worms sitting there. And they actually hit my grandfather's co-pilot in the head and killed him. And my grandfather bailed out. He parachuted down. He landed in the Pacific Ocean, which is full of sharks. They were all hoping not to get eaten. And they all knew that if there was much blood, the sharks would just come in. It would be a feeding frenzy. But thankfully that didn't happen. And then they had these radio flotation devices that they would, blow up, and that would be like their life preservers. And they called them Mae West, actually, after this actress from the time who was apparently very curvy and sexy. So yes. they called it Mae West. And eventually they got saved. And he had a number of other stories of action that he used to tell me about. And so that's kind of where it started. And when I was getting my master's degree, I was thinking, what am I going to do when I'm done with my master's? What am I going to do? Go back to corporate communications for pharmaceutical companies, which my heart wasn't really into. And so we printed, I learned how to format the book the hard way. It took a lot of time and sort of trial and error. And I scanned the pictures, and we printed 50 copies and gave them out to everyone. And people were like, wow, really cool. And I was like, boom, here we go. This could be a business. I could make a living doing it, and I love doing it. And then soon after that, I did my wife's great uncle, who was also a World War II vet who fought under Patton in Europe and saw some action. And the stories are amazing. And then I started meeting Holocaust survivors and so many people. And it's gone from there.
So wonderful. Agnes, what inspired you to want to do this? Is there a specific story you want to tell or is it the whole thing, like the way it works in general?
Well, ask Richard, because mine's going to be such a beautiful fairy tale story.
Agnes' story is a love story. Even though it's not your typical life story memoir love story in that it's features a couple, but her story has a beautiful happy ending, which you have earned.
Does that happen every time? Like after you hear whoever the story, you start to see it as, hey, this is an adventure, or this is a supernatural story. This one's science fiction. This one is, a romance. Do you kind of put them in different categories like that?
I don't really categorize them. I mean, I do if they're, if they're a veteran and they're talking about their military experience, then, but usually that's not all they're talking about. That's just a part of their story. Or, if they're a Holocaust survivor, it kind of automatically goes into a category. But otherwise, not really. Everyone is unique. Everyone has their own story. Everyone's stories have things in common. So, I mean, in one sense, a lot of the stories have a lot in common. But in another sense, when you drill, at the high level they do. But when you drill down, everyone's experiences are unique. So I always just say, like, I have some of my clients, they're not people who have the kinds of stories that you would make a movie about. They're kind of ordinary. But when you drill down, just falling in love or just becoming a parent, just the way that happened in their own unique way and in the way that they experienced that, it's unique.
Sorry. Mine are not really ordinary. I do not agree with that.
Well, not yours.
I do have my war stories. You can say that, right?
Yeah.
There is love, there is drama, there's a lot of different things. Yeah, you cannot really categorize one, put me on one shelf. I'm unique. Yes, I'm very unique.
I would think that every story, they kind of go into different things depending on where you've lived, where you've been. There could be crime in it. There could be drama. Regardless, there's always drama, right? No, you don't want to tell them about the bank robbery. Okay.
Later.
Okay. Yeah, no spoilers. But yeah, the idea would be that it could be anybody's life could be anything. If you just have lived, right? If the longer, oh, and is that something too? Like, are you getting most people after or later in life, or are there many people who you've also done like early on? Like when I think of Kamala, the girl from Afghanistan who
Yeah.
was fighting against in my mind, I'm like, she could have her biography done already, right? But at the same time, it's possible that a person could be 70 or 80 years old and have a boring, very drab life that really doesn't, have anything much in it.
You could you could have someone who's had an amazing life and doesn't really talk very much. You could have someone who talks a lot and hasn't had an amazing life. You could also have someone, you could have a story where not that much happens, but it's told beautifully.
Oh,
so anything can be made to work. And
yeah.
when you were asking about the photography book and if the way that if the process was different, where was I going with that? I'm sorry, I'm losing my.
If I may jump in here,
Yeah.
I think Richard's gift is to make his clients, right? They look for you. You're not going you're not knocking to anybody's door. When the client reach you out, you ask always, why do they want to write this book? Why do they want that? So everyone has different perspective. Either inspire others or leave the legacy, pass on the history, something. There is a reason, and your gift allows you to tell the story in a way that are actually interesting, that people, when they pick up that book, they will be interesting. And we don't know much about our grandparents or even about our parents, uncles, or whoever. There's a lot of people that we just pass by and they're in the family, but we, like you said, some people don't talk much, but they might have amazing story to tell, so they finally will decide to tell it. But not everyone has a gift to tell in a way that it will be interesting, to grab somebody's interest. And you do that, and you do that for other people. I think that you have beautiful gift, which thank God that we know about. More people will find out about what you're doing. And I think it's a beautiful idea to leave the history for other generations, the information to pass on. As a lot of people, you know friend of mine. Yes, his grand somebody signed Declaration of Independence, but that's all what he knows about this person. He doesn't have any more information. He doesn't know much about the life of a person. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Like, okay, great. Who was he? Who was that person? So thanks to Richard's gift, now people can find out about their ancestry. Like, look at it. I mean, like, look what happened to me when I found out about my DNA. I mean, like, my world exploded. So this is great. Now I'm talking to my son. I'm sure that we're gonna leave something for my grandchildren to find out about exactly where they came from. I think it's a beautiful thing that I can leave. That's gonna be another book, Richard, that we're gonna work on.
It turns out you're Jamaican. You're partially Jamaican. Is that what you found in your DNA?
Nigerian, yes.
Nigerian.
Nigerian princess.
No, are you serious?
I knew it.
No.
I don't know.
But thanks to Richard's gift, people can leave, a beautiful history for other people that they don't have to keep digging in. They can just pick up the book and find out where they came from, what happened to the family, like at least the most important things. And I think that's very important. Instead, just sitting and talking. Do you remember when Grandma said that? Do you think that's what it meant? Things like that. It's like it's a beautiful. I think everyone should do that. I think everyone should do that.
Thank you, Agnes. Yeah, the benefits. I've written a bunch of blogs about the benefits. They just go very deep for the people who tell the story, but also for the family members who receive the story. So for the people, one of the things I really love about the interview, and it's maybe my favorite part, besides maybe delivering the finished book, is that, it can be very therapeutic for the people who are telling their stories. And they can make these connections and learn things about themselves, and that can make a difference for them. But it's also beneficial to the family that's receiving the story and learning about it. And they've done studies where people who know more about their ancestors and where they come from feel that they have a better foothold in the world, and they know where they stand, and they know the tradition that they're part of.
Absolutely.
That would make sense, that they kind of, and also it makes it so that you understand where you're coming from, and then could also be able to say, oh, I can do this, or I can move forward in doing these things because I actually have it in my blood to do it. Or people before me, there are echoes in my past that allow me to do a similar thing. I mean, I could see how it could embolden and empower a person to know exactly who their ancestors were, what they did, not just what they looked like. Or you grow up, and you look at your grandpa and you're like, oh, look at that, he's an older man or whatever, and you don't think that, but you hear a story, a full-on story of who he was or what happened, can change everything. I have quite a few stories about my parents, my grandparents. I'm just like, you lived through what? Are you crazy? But they're wonderful, wonderful stories of overcoming or figuring out who they are, and then being able to say, oh, I'm part of it. This is part of my legacy.
Right? This is who I am. These are the people I come from.
That's
It's totally empowering. Yeah.
Knowing who you are, knowing where you came from, knowing your family history, I think not only empowers, but also raises your self-esteem, your self-value. If you pay attention to those things, knowing that people that came before you, they were, if you find them fascinating, if you find them honorable, if you find, or maybe they had difficult life, and knowing that they overcome certain situations. I am very proud of the family that I come from, knowing what they went through, knowing where they went, and what happened to them. For people that who know me, they know that I don't suffer with low self-esteem, that's for sure. But that it's a big part of it, that I know where I came from and who my ancestors were. That this is very empowering. I feel very rich on the inside. I feel very rich with all that knowledge, because that's what made me who I am. And I feel more adventurous thanks to that.
Very cool. Very cool.
It answers questions. Yes. Yeah. Imagine knowing that you were the spitting image of your great grandmother or great grandfather. You look just like her, and she, was a beautiful woman who, was successful and powerful. What a great thing to know. Imagine knowing that there's alcoholism in your family, that there's a history of it, and that when you're young, and it affects, it helps you want to stay away from alcohol.
Yes, that's very.
It kind of feels like that whole DNA thing that you were talking about too, Agnes. Like, I know a lot of people are using that now. They're looking at their DNA, they're looking at their blood type, and they're saying, hey, where do I come from and where am I from? So they can stay away from certain things or pay attention to certain things so that they don't, have those issues. But I also think it's really a great way to just find out more about your family, moving forward, figuring it out. Richard, who generally comes to you for this service, for the service that you provide?
I would say half of my clients are the storytellers themselves, who want to share their story. They want to get it down in a book, and they know that they want their family to have it. And they know that by talking to me, they'll be able to tell their story, kind of straight from the horse's mouth in their words, and they can frame it the way that they want it to be told and the way they want it to be remembered. And then the other half are the children and the grandchildren of who want to do this as a gift for their parents or grandparents because they see the value in capturing the stories. They see the value for their family to have it forever for many generations going forward.
Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's perfect to have it as a living memoir as opposed to waiting and then trying to figure it out later on. You probably never find out half of the things that you should find out.
I will say, I talk to a lot of people and they say, oh, I wish I captured it. We know some things, but now we don't know the whole story. And to that, I say, you might as well try and capture what you have.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Even if grandma passed away, you have her stories now, and your children are going to have less of those stories. The edges are going to be, sanded off, and their children are going to have even less of that. So you should capture it while you can. I also do tributes for, someone who wants to do the story of someone who passed away, and it's a celebration of their life and a way to pay testimony to them, but also to capture the stories that they can capture.
Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have been listening, you've been listening to Richard Squires, who's been explaining to us, the owner of LifeStory Memoir. He's been explaining to us exactly what he does, how he does it, by putting together memoirs for people who want to, well, let's put it this way. Your family stories are valuable and precious, and people will say all the time, I wish I had asked my family members before it was too late what their lives were like were growing up and what they knew about our ancestors. LifeStory Memoirs' mission is to help families make sure their stories are never lost. You can find out more about it at LifeStoryMemoir.com. We'll also have his social media and email in the description below. Richard, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. I was going to say thank you for explaining this to us, but also for sharing how the process goes, because the way people are putting this together or coming to you about it is just as fascinating.
Thank you so much for having me. Can I add one more thing?
Please.
I just want to say that I'm really excited about this. There's something I'm working on now. It's a new company that I co-founded with an amazing team, and it's taking what I do to the next level. It's basically building on the foundation of what I've established with LifeStory, becoming, an expert storyteller, memoir writer, helping people tell their stories. I've always had the dream that I would be able to help, instead of dozens of people, hundreds of people, that I'd be able to help thousands of people. And the only way to do that would be through an app that utilizes AI, artificial intelligence. And I had this idea years and years ago, but I thought there's no way it could be possible. Well, that's what we're doing now. We're developing an app where people can collaborate together in a space to share their stories and images and create books or digital books or videos, things like that. And I'm so excited. It's the very beginning stages, but I'm going to keep my audience posted on that.
That's fascinating, because in my head, I was thinking to myself, AI is ruining this for writers. It has to be messing it up. But you're so right. This is what I've been saying to people. As a person who's in marketing, I know that there's a lot of writing that I end up having to do. And the tool just helps me write faster. I don't consider it something like, okay, I don't want to deal with this AI because it's taking over everything and it's going to replace me. No, a person who has learned how to do AI well will replace maybe 5 other people who have decided they're not going to do anything with it. I think it's great that you're actually moving forward with the tech, as opposed to saying, okay, this is the only way that you can create it, because that's the beauty of AI too. You can actually set up structures that say, okay, it should be in this format. You need to ask these questions and go one through it. Without telling us too much about how it's going. Is that more like what you're actually putting together, like a format or a
right?
system?
You can't just let the AI do its own thing, right? And for me, nothing is more important than quality control. Like my clients have to love what I deliver. It has to reflect them. It has to be their voice. It has to capture their essence, you know. And I have never had a client look at their book and say, I didn't say that, or that's not how I said it, because that's so important to me. So the trick with the AI is figuring out how to get it to behave the way that I would behave. It's going to interview people the way that I would interview them, and it's going to edit their words the way that I would edit it. And that's kind of the trick. And it's, you know, that's where it's not that easy to do it. You know, it takes time and trial and error.
It keeps growing. They just released a new version of it, I think last week. And it has to learn. And, you know, it's kind of like everything else, like garbage in, garbage out, right? So you kind of have to explain to it what it is that you want to say and how you want to do it. But again, ladies and gents, thank you so very much, Richard. We're looking forward to Agnes's book. We're looking forward to checking out some of the other books that are on LifeStoryMemoir.com.
Yeah, if you visit the site, you can read some excerpts, see some pictures. Yeah.
Cool. Very, very cool. All right. Agnes, you want to have the last word?
Yes, I'm looking behind Richard at the cover books, and I just came up with a fantastic idea of a picture of that I want to take for the cover. So, and you'll be taking that picture, Ryan. So.
Very well. All right, so ladies and gents, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us at Love, Death, and Taxes. If you do have some questions about this, you can send it to mailbag@lovedeathandtaxes.com. If you are looking for some sort of tax resolution or some sort of issues that you have with taxes, ladies and gents, you know that Agnes is the person to go to at nytaxresolutions.com. And I want to thank you again, Richard Squires, for coming and hanging out with us from LifeStoryMemoir.com. Go to the website. If you want to capture, if you've got an older person in your family and you want to grab as much information from them and pass it on to your kids and your kids' kids and your kids' 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 kids, this is probably where you want to go. Go check out Richard at LifeStoryMemoir.com.
This is not only for older people, mister.
I'm getting myself into trouble, but no, for sure. If you want to grab that, you want to hold that stuff for posterity. You want to make sure that you know exactly what's going on.
No matter what age you are.
Yeah, no matter what age.
It's never too early.
Because people start changing the stories, guys. Tricycles, sodas, all of that. You'll be surprised. Thanks again, Richard.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week.